Hello, everybody. It's great for you to be here. Thank you for joining me and drawing with me. I really appreciate all those who come and draw with me. Remember, this channel is not about showcasing talents and abilities. It's about helping you to get some techniques and some styles of drawing that you can make your own, and eventually your own voice will come through, and you'll find your own niche in this art world. I'm so grateful for you to be here, though. Today we're going to be drawing with ink. I'm going to be using a Pigma Micron pen and #2 pencil and a kneaded eraser on just some good drawing paper. So come along with me and let's do a little practicing and figure out this thing called ink. When you're figuring out where to put everything, a good way to start this is #2 pencil, just to sketch in things. Remember, everything we draw with the pencil gets erased. So the first thing we need to do is figure out where everything goes. And so start with simple shapes. And this lion is chock full of simple shapes. So what's the first simple shape you see? Okay, you can say his face. Let's get his whole mane and everything. Is that kind of oval? Yeah. So if you start up at the top of your page and you say, well, come down about an inch or so and say, if that's where the top of his head's going to be, and his little paw is going to be down in here, somewhere about down in there is where his big mane is. Then you say to yourself, well, let's see, I can see his big old paw is about right in there. Maybe his arm kind of comes up this way. And how much of that main shape is his head? You kind of come up and say, well, if you go about right halfway through it, that's about where his eyes go. And if that's his eyes, then his head's going to be, about like this. And if that's not big enough, you can adjust it. Just keep adjusting until it's about the right size. One thing you want to look for, too, when you're proportioning things and figuring out where everything goes, is all that negative space. Like in between his paw and his back leg, there's this little triangle there. If you just draw that triangle in, then you've got the back leg. His front leg maybe comes in here. That one might be a little bit too wide. So I'll just adjust it. Keep adjusting until it's about what you want. You'll probably notice, too, that I left him over on this side because this side of him is very linear, very vertical. It relates to the edge of my paper, and so if I can slide it over there, it's a little bit better composition. That way I can put a little grass or something over here, and it's just more interesting, that asymmetrical balance. And really, there's no reason to erase unless something is really bothering you. You can get rid of some lines. But overall, everything else is going to be erased anyway. And there's really no reason to do too much detail here, but you do want to get the eyes where the eyes go. So you kind of figure out, well, if I've got an eye about right there, about opposite that, somewhere in there. And if you think about this, if you go straight down from the eye, there's the nose over there. So I could come in and say, well, his nose is going to be about right in there somewhere. Little triangle. Straight down from the eye, that's about the end of his nose. And you can kind of block in some things, just figure out where things are going to go. And if this isn't in the right place, we can always change it. Nothing is permanent until you start laying that ink down. Now, I know you can't see it, but back up in here are some ears up in there. And as you start drawing the ink line in there, you'll see little lighter areas right up in here. And that's because the hair kind of gets pushed out from his ear. You can see maybe the very tip of his ear over here. And maybe a little bit of that over there too. But for the most part, it gets covered up by the hair. And what's most important here is the head. Your eye is going to go to that head. that's your emphasis area. That's the thing that you want people to see. So we're going to spend a little extra time on that head. Make sure the head is working out. So I'm going to start with the eyes. Those eyes are so important. And the important thing with the eyes, that the bottom edge is very round. So I'm just going to kind of come in. You can use little dots and dashes, but that bottom ring is very dark. A lot of animals have very dark rings around their eyes, and the big cats, they're one of them. The top part is a little cut off. It's a little flatter on the top part because there's an eyelid that goes over that. And then there's always a little dark triangle right there towards the nose. Most cats have these, especially the big cats, and a lot of animals do. Wolves. And so I'm just going ahead and putting in those little dark rings around there. Anything that's dark that you can see. Inside the eye, now the light source is coming from this direction. You're not going to see much of a highlight in that eye, but I'm going to go ahead and put one in anyway. The pupil is quite small, but I'm going to do this little C shape right there, just a little C. And what that does is it gives it the illusion that that eye has a little shine in it. So just that little C shape that's right there. I'm going to do the same thing on this eye. This eye is more in the light, and so it's you can see it a little bit better. Rarely do you see the entire pupil because there's often a shine across there or something. So I just assume that that's what I'm going to see, and that's what I put in there. This eye is a little darker, so I'm just going to hatch through it. And there's ways you can do this. You can starburst from the inside of the eye, so you can come in and you can put little lines coming this way, or you can just kind of hatch through it. You can just kind of hatch through it like that. However you want to do it, or you could even put little dots in there if you want to. It's kind of up to you how you do it. I'm just going to kind of hatch through it. And you probably have noticed that I barely touch the paper with my pen. Very little pressure on this. Over here, this eye is very light. I may want to keep that eye pretty bright. I might only want just a couple little dots in there, especially right up at the very top. But the rest of that eye stays pretty light. And again, if I need to, I can always come back in and add a little bit more. So I'm just going to darken in some of those edges around the eye. Now, if you want to start doing like the fur around the eye, you can do that. Use that feathered line where you kind of drop your pen in and make a little flip, 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 flip. So that's one way. And when you're doing fur, especially when you get out into the mane and it's long, you want to do a longer line and you flip some up, some down. You can curve some. So it's not all the same. Okay? But the hair is shorter in the face, and as it moves out, it gets a little bit longer. So I'm going to do the same thing with my pen. I'm going to just start here and do some very small little flippy lines. Anything that is dark, you can add a little bit of line to that. Try to go in the direction that the hair flows. So from this side, it's going to flow out this way. From this side, it's going to flow out this way. So as I come over on this side, my line is coming out the other way. And the more line you add, the better it's going to look. If it's dark. If it's not, don't add line to it. When in doubt, leave it out. You can also use little dots and dashes if you want to, anywhere. If you think, well, I see a little bit of shadow, a little bit of value there, instead of line, you might want to use a little dot. You can also, this side of his head is really fairly dark. And so I know I'm going to be doing these little lines, but what if I went through this and hatched through that? Just hatch through it, hatch, 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 because I know it's fairly dark. So then I've created that shadow, and then as I go through it with some of these other style of line, it just kind of helps that to be a little darker. And you can turn and twist your paper if you want to. I usually just adjust my hand, but you can do what you want to, whatever's most comfortable. When you're doing shaded things like his nose, you can see his nose is fairly dark, but there are some darker areas and some lighter areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come straight down off the corner of his eye. So if I come straight down off of here, somewhere down in there is where his nose starts. So I'm just going to start shading in that little shape of the nose. Here's the other part of his nose. I'm just shading in that. If you wanted to take your pencil and draw a little bit around there, you could. You can shade in that whole little area like that, and then kind of adjust it with other little lines or dots. And again, it's kind of up to you how you do it. And the more line you add, the darker it's going to get. I like to clean up my edges with dots. So you just go in and just little dots or little lines, whatever you feel like you need. One thing that's going to help that quite a bit is to get rid of this graphite. He's got a tongue that you can kind of see, so I'm just going to throw in some darkness around that tongue, and then there's his tongue. Dark things have a tendency to go away from you or go in. Light things come forward. And we can always come back into this and add more. So don't go too far. Don't add too much to begin with. Like I say, we can always add more. Remember, we're not drawing lines around things. That's what you do in grade school. And so instead of drawing lines, you can use little dots or dashes. We have subliminal line. So like the edge of his jowl that's right there, you can use hair from his mane to define the edge of that jowl. Same thing with around his chin that's right there. You can use the hair from behind in his mane to define that. And so rather than draw that line around there, I'm just going to use the shadow that's behind him to help define that edge. It will also make his fur, or his, you know, the hair that's right there, kind of come through, and you can see that more. Same thing up with the side of his head right here. I can see that shadow in there, but I'm going to use some of this fur, this hair, to define it. I just keep adding more. There are very few edges that you're going to have a sharp line around it. And if you're not quite in the right place, you can always adjust this in and out. If you drew a line, you couldn't adjust it. It would be there forever. So that's one thing that I learned, how to adjust things so they are not there forever. And the little white whiskers that are in there, because they're so light, just leave them out. Just don't even worry about them. Hopefully he's starting to look like a lion. I always look at my ink drawings at the beginning and think, oh, that looks terrible, those lines and everything. But once you start adding more to it, it looks better. It'll look better. Okay, keep going. It'll look better. Like I say, you can always go into it and add a little bit more. Whenever you're doing hair that's coming out, and this works for people, it works for any kind of animal, I can see a definite area where that hair comes out, but rather than draw a line, I'm just going to take these little edges and come out in the direction that the hair flows. If I were to draw a line, first of all, it'd be stuck there, and secondly, it would look fake, like a toupee. And again, I'm barely touching the paper. That way you're going to get this really thin line. I really want to get rid of this graphite as soon as I can. So I'm going to, once you get the head about the way you want it, and yes, there's lots more that we need to do to it. We need to come back in and do a whole bunch more to it. But it's pretty much where I want it. Now I'm going to just go and define everything else. And then I'm going to get rid of the graphite and then just finish it up with as much line as you need to get your values in there. So same thing on this side. I'm going to use these little lines to create that edge that I can see there. And where his mane ends, you just leave it. Just let that hair take care of itself. All these feathered lines. I'm trying to go in the direction that the hair flows. So as I move down, the hair kind of moves down and away from it. Some of that hair is a little lighter. Some of that hair is pretty dark. So I just want to define that as much as I can. I was a little short, so I'm going to have to bring him down just a little bit. That's okay. I left myself a little bit of space. I can do that. Here's the shadow that's around the side of his hand and his paw as it comes in. That's the shadow down his paw. And I know that's not what it looks like, but I can see that shadow and I can always adjust it. I can always add more to it. Here's the shadow that's on his back leg. And that's not perfect. I understand it. But if I draw a line, I'm stuck with it. Now that hind leg there, you may not want to even draw it in. You could do a couple little dashes or a dot and just say that's where that leg should be, where I think it is. If it isn't, you can always adjust it. If you draw your line, you can't adjust it. You're stuck with it. Don't be stuck. But that's enough information for me that now I can get rid of my graphite, keep it nice and clean. So all my edges and everything are now gone. And I'm still not stuck with anything. The head looks okay. I still got to go back in and do more with the head. That's okay. And if you think to yourself, oh, well, there's more hair that comes out, you can always add more. If I drew a line there, I couldn't add it. I'm stuck. Hopefully you're seeing that advantage there of not drawing edges. This side of his head is again very, very dark, so I'm going to hatch through that till I get to the light that's around here. Because I know there's shadow here, and I know there's shadow up in here, and I know there's shadow down here. I can hatch through that. Whenever I can see shadow, I can hatch through it. His back leg was off a little bit, so I'm just going to take those hatching and move it over just a little bit. And again, the head is the most important thing, so I'm going to go back into the head and see if I can't detail that out a little bit more, make it look a little bit better. And as you crosshatch, as you go through and start crosshatching, all those values are start to smooth out. Edge of his chin. Still looks soft and fuzzy. If we'd drawn a line there, it would be hard. We don't want it hard. Remember, if you want something to look soft and fuzzy, you'll leave a lot out. Here, though, his mane is quite dark. So I'm still going to leave those edges soft and fuzzy. But I'm just going to go back in and scribble a little bit into that darkness. And as long as your edges are good, I can go back in here and just randomly scribble, 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 any direction. And because it's so dark, it's okay. It's your edges, though. Make sure those edges stay nice and soft. Those feathered lines. Up here where the mane starts to get a little lighter, just leave it out where it's light. And just do everything else around it. I know you're saying, Mr. Lowe, you're just scribbling. At this point, yes. I've established my outside. I've established where everything goes. Now we just scribble. We just scribble in those dark areas. Very few white areas. Around his eye there, a little bit on his cheek and his... But the rest of it has to have a few little dots or dashes in there. Just to keep that value down. It's interesting when you think, oh, I put enough line in there, it's fairly dark. You draw some more around it, and then you come back and go, oh, it wasn't dark enough. So you just add more. But it's best to leave it out, because what if? You can always add more later. And hopefully, eventually, this is going to become exactly what you want it to be. Just keep going. Just keep working on it. Don't lose heart there. Especially right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, you think to yourself, oh, well, it's all these lines, and they get kind of confusing, and it's easy to feel like it's never going to go anywhere. Just keep working on it. Have a little faith there. It'll do okay. It gets better. And you're not drawing fur, and you're not drawing, skin and flesh. You're just drawing shapes of dark and light. So as I'm doing the paw down here, I'm just drawing that shape of dark. And don't worry about the edge. The edge will take care of itself. And he's kind of stuck in some of that grass anyway. So you can even, if you wanted to, here's some shadow back in here of grass. It's just these little flippy lines. You can darken in some areas, leave some areas light. And everybody understands, oh, that's grass. I get it. Here's a little grass behind his paw. And the interesting thing is that will define his paw. And so there's the definition of his paw, but I didn't draw the line. I didn't draw the paw. I just drew everything behind it. Sometimes the best drawing is the drawing that you don't do. You draw everything else in between, and then it comes out. Here's the core shadow that goes up his back leg. You just draw the core shadow there. And even your edges of your leg really don't matter that much. If you wanted to, you could draw a little grass coming out from over there. That will help define his back leg. There's a little muscle back in there. Really, that's about it. Just let your viewer imagine that back leg. Here's some more grass. It's just scribbles, Everybody understands that that's dirt, grass, rock, whatever's down there. You may want to leave yourself a little bit of space over there for a signature. That would be a great place for a signature. Or up in there would also be a good place for a signature. A little coarse shadow that runs up his nose right there. I'm just going to darken that up a little bit. Always looking for things like that that can help that form to come through. Hopefully you had a lot of fun doing this. And if you didn't, I hope you learned something at least. It's interesting how fast time goes when you're drawing. Your right side has no time concept. So when you're drawing, you're in your right side of the brain, you're losing track of time. Sometimes if there's a little bit of value back in there and you do those really thin lines, that can help define your edge too. And of course, the last thing you want to do with this is sign it. A good place for that signature is somewhere over there, somewhere. I'm going to do mine right there. I hope you've enjoyed drawing this lion with me, and that it's good practice. And I hope somehow this has enriched your life a little bit and made it a little bit nicer, because art makes life better if you let it. And I hope you all have a lovely day.